Somewhere out in the desert, there's a game board carved straight into a rock face. Not painted, not scratched in the dirt. Carved into stone, meant to last thousands of years. Hey, welcome back to Framesy. If you like this kind of deep dive into ancient history and the weird stuff we've dug up about being human, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel keep making these. And honestly, that carving should bug you a little. Who sat down and did that? And what were they doing the rest of the time when they weren't playing on it? Because we've all got this picture in our heads of ancient people just surviving. Hunt, gather, make fire, sleep, repeat. Leisure feels like something we invented, like it came after Netflix and the 9 to 5. But the actual evidence tells a pretty different story. And the last thing I'm going to show you today is so strange, it barely makes sense at first. But it might be the most honest thing we've ever dug up about what it actually means to be human. So this is a video about what people did when they weren't working. And the more I dug into this, the more I started to think the whole work vs free time framing might just be wrong from the start. I went through a bunch of the archaeology, the anthropology, the objects people have actually pulled out of the ground. And what I found is that ancient leisure wasn't just a simpler version of ours. In a lot of ways, it was weirder and honestly smarter than what we do now. Let's start with the bones. Literally. Before dice were something you rolled in a game, they might have been something people used to talk to the universe. There's a whole practice called astrogalomancy, basically divination using knuckle bones. The bones themselves came from the ankles of sheep and goats, and archaeologists keep finding marked versions of them at old religious and burial sites all over the Mediterranean and the Near East. Think about what that actually means. The thing we now think of as game night or a casino floor started out as a way of asking a question you couldn't answer any other way. At places like the Oracle of Aphrodite in Cyprus, people would throw these bones and then check tables that assigned meanings to every possible combination they could land on. You weren't rolling to see if your piece moved 3 spaces. You were rolling to find out if your crops were going to make it or whether you should go to war. For most of human history, a random outcome wasn't just chance. It was a message. When a Roman soldier threw dice, he wasn't just gambling. On some level, he was checking in with fate. There wasn't a line between playing a game and asking a serious question. They were the same act, using the same object. That's not some primitive misunderstanding. It's just a completely different relationship with randomness than we have today. Which means the very first game nights in human history were also, in a sense, religious ceremonies. Okay, here's where it gets even older. Mancala is genuinely hard to date, because all it needs is a few holes in the ground and some seeds or pebbles. The oldest confirmed stone Mancala boards show up in Eritrea and Ethiopia, some going back to around 1400 BCE, though some researchers think it's much older, based on pit patterns found at Neolithic sites that are harder to date cleanly. There's a limestone slab found in Jordan, carved into the floor of a Neolithic house. That looks a lot like a modern Mancala board, and it might date back to around 5870 BCE. That's not a typo. But here's the detail that really got me. Archaeologists have found stone Mancala boards carved into the actual roofs of temples in Memphis, Thebes, and Luxor. Not a portable wooden board you'd carry around. Not something scratched into dirt. Carved into a temple rooftop. That tells you people weren't just playing a casual game. They were building permanent infrastructure for it. A game board wasn't something you owned. It was somewhere you went. And speaking of places people went, the fact that these boards show up in tombs and temples tells you this wasn't just entertainment. It meant something. Everyone knows Egyptian royalty were buried with Senate boards, so they'd have something to do on the journey to the afterlife. But here's the part people usually skip. Senate wasn't just a royal thing. Ordinary people drew the same grid into sand, all over the social ladder. Rich, poor, living, dead. Everybody played this game. It might be the first, genuinely universal human pastime we have evidence for. There's also this story about a Babylonian board game that almost disappeared completely. A researcher spent years trying to reconstruct the rules from a recovered artifact. No instructions, no living tradition to fall back on. The breakthrough happened when he tracked down a retired schoolteacher living near Jerusalem, whose family had left Babylon for India generations earlier. She still remembered playing the game as a kid. An entire piece of ancient culture, saved because one person happened to remember it. That's how close we came to just losing it. Now, remember that question from the start of the video. What were people doing when they weren't playing games? This is where it gets interesting. There are these flutes found in Germany, called the Jason-Klösterl flutes, and they're somewhere around 42,000 to 43,000 years old. Carved from bird bones and mammoth ivory. One of them, made from the hollow wing bone of a griffon vulture, is just 8 millimeters wide, originally about 34 centimeters long, with 5 finger holes and a V-shaped mouthpiece. That's not a rough scrape on a rock somewhere. That's a precision instrument. Somebody sat down and actually engineered that. And there's a decent chance early humans were sitting around the fire 40,000 years ago, playing these flutes and singing. Music might be the oldest confirmed leisure object we've ever found. Not a game. Not a painting. A musical instrument. Which means the first thing people reached for in a quiet moment was something that made a nice sound for absolutely no practical reason. That's not the behavior of a species just trying to stay alive. That's a species that needed meaning, connection, and something beautiful, 40,000 years before anyone came up with the word entertainment. And that's really the thing that reframes this whole video for me. Maybe, what did ancient humans do when they were bored, is just the wrong question. Because in societies before specialization and industrial labor, work and play weren't separate boxes the way they are for us. Hunting took skill and strategy, and depended on trusting the people next to you. Making tools took creativity. Rituals blended obligation and celebration into the same event. This whole idea that there's a clean line between labor and leisure, that you clock out and then go find something to do, that's a modern invention. It's not some universal human experience. What ancient people had instead was something closer to one continuous thing. Making music, playing a game, throwing bones to ask fate a question, carving a board into a temple roof. All of it part of the same life, not separate activities you switched between. There was no boredom to kill, because the work itself wasn't built to hollow you out first. That's the part that actually gets me the most. We invented entertainment to recover from a way of living that ancient people never needed to recover from in the first place. That flute player 42,000 years ago wasn't escaping anything. They were just fully there, in a life that hadn't been split into pieces yet. If any of this hit differently for you, drop a comment. I want to know which part landed. The Knucklebone Oracle thing still gets me every time I think about it. And hey, if you made it this far, that means you're exactly the kind of person this channel is made for. So do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe to Framesy if you haven't already, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one. There's a video right here that goes even deeper into how ancient people thought about time, ritual, and the stuff they built just because they wanted to. Worth the next 10 minutes. See you in the next one.